Statement of François Deschamps regarding the family and presumed marriage of Benoît Maçon. Statement given June 4th, 2014. Audio recording by Jonathan Sims, Head Archivist of the Magnus Institute, London. Statement begins. Why do you need me to live it over again? To recount a story you know well enough already? You were there, at least for the parts worth discussing. You want me to tell you what happened before then, how I met Benoît, his character, how he became my friend? Truth be told, he was not my friend. He was simply a colleague, someone I might describe myself as well disposed to, but probably not even that. It may seem dismissive to you, but in my experience there are two situations where one finds themselves working behind a bar when over the age of 40. The first is that you own the establishment yourself, what the English call a publican, and see no reason to hire others to perform duties you are quite capable of yourself. The second is when a profound failure has brought you to the middle of your life with no wealth, no prospects, and no skills that could be applied in more lucrative avenues. Suffice it to say that Benoît Maçon did not own Le Papillon Blanc. It was not one of the most fashionable spots in Toulouse, sitting just on the edge of where the tourist-facing centre meets the firmly residential, and never quite settling on either side. It billed itself as a cafe in the day, but most of its business was after dark, when all pretense was dropped and it became simply a comparatively cheap place to drink. I worked the bar there with Benoît and a few others, and had done for a couple of years since I left school. Of all the others who worked Le Papillon alongside me, I would probably have said that Benoît was the one who interested me the least. There was an air of sadness about him, a melancholy that I found unsurprising, given the position he had found himself in, but distasteful nonetheless. My own life has certainly had its hardships, and I cannot help but detest those who indulge in self-pity. Though, having seen his fate, perhaps some pity was earned. Benoît was, as far as I could tell, all alone in the world, and rather unhappy about the fact. It was rare that the topic of parents or family would be raised or discussed without his appearing, as if from nowhere, to quietly volunteer the fact that his parents were dead, or his lack of siblings, or whatever it might have been. Whatever familial bond was the topic of conversation, Benoît Maçon did not have it, and expected, no, demanded, that you pity him for the fact. It will not surprise you to learn that he wore no wedding ring, that when a young couple would enter the cafe to pass their time in wine and affection, he would simply stare at them, his face a mask of ill-concealed envy. I am deeply grateful it was rare that we had children in Le Papillon, as the one time they came in while he was on shift, he vanished for almost 20 minutes, and when he returned, it was clear he'd been crying. All told, he was a pathetic, lonely man, desperate for any human connection. A connection I had no intention of offering him. Quite frankly, I believe I have spoken more words about Benoît Maçon in the last 5 minutes than I did in all the many months we worked together. I wasn't even the one that noticed the changes in his behavior. That was our manager, Lucille. About 5 weeks ago, she offhandedly asked me if I knew of any alteration in Benoît's personal or home life. He had, so she told me, been significantly more cordial with her over the previous few days. He had been smiling, laughing, generally not acting like himself. I told her I didn't know and hadn't noticed, but the next shift I saw what she meant. It was as though a different man were wearing the skin of Benoît, a man who had always known the deep joys of life. I watched this new person go about their happy life for almost an entire night before I finally decided that I simply had to ask him what had happened. At first he appeared puzzled by my question, but when I told him how much happier he seemed, his smile grew wide. He leaned in close to me and looked around playfully as if pretending to check for eavesdroppers. "A woman," he said at last. "François, I am in love, and she loves me." And then, without warning, he grabbed me with both arms and pulled me into a short embrace which I was simply too stunned to resist. Up close, I could not help but notice the faintest of odors from his skin, It was a damp smell, like decaying wood. And it wasn't until I had a chance to shower and change my clothes after work that I finally managed to rid myself of it completely. It was not a pleasant smell, certainly, but it was not awful. What bothered me was its presence at all. I knew Benoît to be a clean, almost fastidious man, prone to wearing slightly too much cologne. This was new, and beyond that there was something to the smell itself. Some memory of a childhood spent in the country around Lyon, of wandering out into the damp heat after a summer rain, of turning over logs slick with moisture to reveal the crawling underbelly beneath them. But for the most part, I ignored it. After all, if I could remain unconcerned about Benoît when he was miserable, doing so when he was happy hardly seemed like a challenge. And indeed he continued to be happy, almost to the point of bliss, for almost the entire month following. The smell was growing ever so gradually stronger, to the point where I would occasionally see my colleagues wrinkle their noses when he went to talk to them. But it never quite reached the stage where it felt worth bringing up with Lucille. Benoît's hygiene more generally also started to noticeably decline. At first, his shirts would be wrinkled when he arrived for work, when before I had only ever seen him wear them crisply ironed. Then there were small stains or tears that could be spotted, as his clothes seemed to be washed less and less regularly. Again, none of this was glaringly obvious, and if his behavior hadn't drawn my attention, it's likely I never would have noticed it at all. Certainly none of the patrons of Le Papillon Blanc ever seemed bothered by his appearance or cleanliness. Through it all, he would talk incessantly to anyone who would listen about this woman who had apparently changed his life. Mon petit scarabée, his little beetle. I was never able to get her actual name from Benoît, as he only seemed to refer to her by that weird nickname. Clear details were also difficult to establish. He could talk for an hour over what his little beetle had told him over breakfast, but when asked about what she did, where she was from, what she looked like, he would always find a way to talk around it and shift the conversation in a new direction. We managed to establish that she had children, as Benoît would often make reference to the little ones, his eyes lighting up with parental pride. They couldn't have been his, obviously, but that didn't seem to matter to him. But, as with their mother, solid details about these children were almost impossible to establish. I would have suspected this new family of his wasn't even real, were it not for the fact that he was clearly not faking his joy or contentment. Either his petit scarabée was real, or Benoît was suffering from a very complex delusion indeed. It never occurred to me it might have been both. It was 2 days ago that it happened. I was thinking earlier how unlikely it was to have been looking so precisely at such a specific spot at such a specific time as to make me absolutely sure of what I witnessed. If I had glanced over a second later, or only caught it from the corner of my eye, I could have easily dismissed it. After all, the simple presence of insects is not in and of itself remarkable. It was where this particular insect came from, however, that shook me so deeply. Benoît was leaning over the bar, listening to a young man who, I believe, was ordering for quite a large group. As this customer listed off his drinks, Benoît's hand rested lightly upon the countertop, and I found, for no reason I could readily provide, my gaze was resting upon the fingers of his hand. Without any warning or reaction from Benoît himself, there seemed to be movement from the ring finger of his right hand. A slight shudder, a shifting of the skin beneath his fingernail. A small patch of darkness seemed to grow just below it, expanding until it resolved itself into the shape of an insect. It pushed itself smoothly and quickly out from below his fingernail and dropped down onto the bar, scuttling away and out of sight so quickly I lost it almost immediately. It had all happened in a matter of moments, and there was no blood, no reaction from Benoît, no evidence that it had truly happened at all, apart from my shaking legs and the feeling I was going to collapse. And it was in that state that your associate found me. At the time, I thought he was your son. His French was significantly better than yours, and it took some time and some difficulty translating before I could fully explain to you what had happened. You rebuffed all my questions about your interest in Benoît and his situation, as you resolutely have since. I am telling you my story since you have asked so nicely, but I will never truly forgive either of you for what you have shown me. I should have been more suspicious of this man, too old for his poorly dyed hair, leading me to an old woman who promised me answers in exchange for an address. I should have walked away. I shouldn't have offered to go with you. But I was in shock from what I had seen, and I believe you could have told me to do almost anything, and I would have been unlikely to argue. You tried to cross-examine me about things I didn't understand. Étranger ou le saleté. I honestly had no idea what you were talking about. But I didn't put up a fight when you told me to get Benoît's address. I don't know why you agreed when I asked to come with you. I wish you hadn't. Do you really need me to describe it? You saw it for yourselves. The flowing tide that swarmed and scuttled as soon as the door opened. The smell that rolled out of that apartment like a choking wall. The thing that embraced Benoît. Mon petit scarabée. The only thing I don't know is if you saw in as much detail as I did the look of sheer contentment and joy on poor Benoît's face as his family crawled all over him. I don't care about what the police might have done. Your young colleague was right. You should have burned the place to the ground. I have nothing more to say to you. Statement ends. This is written in French. All of it. I don't speak French. I don't read. I've never. I wish I could find it in myself to be surprised. A statement, it seems, given directly to Gertrude, though not apparently recorded. Did she perhaps leave her tape recorder at home when she took this little field trip with Gerard? June 2014. Barely a year before her murder, and less than half that before Gerard Key's brain tumor would lead to his own death. Did he know already that his life was ending? Was he trying to accomplish one last good deed before the end? Were they both? Étranger ou la saleté. Foreigner or dirt. Stranger or filth. I can see why, with limited information, Mr. Deschamps' account could lend itself to either interpretation. Sudden appearance of a vague and previously unknown figure inserting itself into someone's life, on the one hand, and on the other, bugs and bad smells. Let it never be said the hive and its ilk are subtle. Still, closer examination points pretty conclusively in that direction. It must have been a disappointment, especially if, as I suspect, Gertrude and Gerard were searching for information on the unknowing. Becerra did some cursory follow-up on the statement itself. Benoît Maçon definitely died in late June 2014, but the Toulouse police records regarding the matter are firmly sealed. François Deschamps has refused our request for a follow-up interview. He did forward us one item, however. I can't read the French on this one, but it appears to be a crudely printed wedding invitation. Benoît Maçon is the only name legible on it, as most of the details are obscured by a wide variety of dried stains. Most helpful of all, though, is the simple fact that Gertrude was in Toulouse in June 2014. The information I found from her laptop doesn't give a complete picture of her travels, but now I know when to look. And it appears that when she left Toulouse, she did not return to London. Instead, it looks like she took several connecting flights, eventually ending up in Wellington International Airport in New Zealand. I can't find any other details on the computer, but I'm going to ask the others to see if they can hunt down any statements referencing New Zealand in or around mid-2014. It might be a wild goose chase, but it's the best lead I have. In the meantime, I have a new flat. I should try to get comfortable, change the locks, even if I might need to be leaving it for a while. Oh, and I suppose I did tell Georgie I'd try to talk to Martin.